excited about today's guest, Chris Rowley from Ballintaggart. Chris is located in Grandley, Perthshire, Scotland. And I met Chris in early June of 2019 when my wife and my youngest daughter and I traveled throughout Scotland. And we got to experience some of Chris's businesses. We stayed in his hotel, the Grandley Hotel by Ballintaggart. We visited the Ballintaggart Farms, a nearby property he has, in which we had a beautiful and amazing 6-course dinner one evening. And we also had an experience, my wife and youngest daughter had an experience at their cooking school on that same property. So Chris, along with his partners, his wife Rachel and brother Andrew, run a series of interconnected businesses. So Chris, welcome to the show. How was
Thank you for asking me along.
Yeah, how was your holiday?
Yeah, fantastic. A lovely break and managed to switch off, which is difficult for when you run your own business. But it's the first time I've taken 2 weeks holiday or vacation since we opened our business. So yeah, really enjoyed it.
Well, this is your first day back, and it is 9:30 your time, p.m., and so I think that kind of helps define that the entrepreneur's day is never done. So thank you again for making the time for us this late in your day. We appreciate it. But Chris, how would you describe Ballintaggart as it is today?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that probably the answer changes every week. But it's a food-based business. We primarily food and hospitality, and anything to do. We try and create foodie experiences for guests, customers that are traveling from either within the UK or out with, who want to experience a really immersive food experience within Scotland. So we all our menus are local and seasonal, and we love hospitality. My wife, my brother, and myself, and we just want to share that basically with all our guests that come through the door. So,
well, look, that shows your love for what you do and the passion that you have. It shows through and through. So, you at the Grandley Hotel in Grandley, there you have an 8-room boutique hotel, I would call it. You've got a restaurant there and an adjoining pub there as well. So you're obviously not just serving your guests, but other people from that are passing through the area. So is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're open as at both properties. We're open as a restaurant. So as well as guests that are staying with us, we're well supported locally, and we're finding increasingly that people are travelling to us as our reputation and our brand grows. We've got 2 different restaurant offerings, and then we also take that experience out to other venues, and we pop up again as our brand has grown within the Scottish market. People have asked us to go and recreate that experience in their venues, so that's another aspect of our business which is quite exciting. So
down at the farm you have a bed and breakfast type thing, your cooking school, and then your a restaurant experience there, and then your catering business, as you just mentioned, on top of all of that. So a lot of moving parts and pieces there, and that's what I was really impressed with in your operation, being able to experience a good chunk of it right there in our last visit. But the diversity of your offerings, I was super impressed, Chris, with your branding that you have across your offerings, the attention to detail in everything. The exceptionally curated rooms and shared spaces, the quality throughout, and the inspired meals. I mean, it strikes me as an exceptionally well managed business and managed by people who genuinely care and are passionate about delivering a quality product. So that really reads through, and I was that meant a lot to me, and I know that certainly helps in the success that you've had to date. And just looking at some Google reviews of your properties is just amazing. The high ratings and the number of just excellent reviews that you've got. So that's all a good testament for the work that you're doing. But I wanted to dial it back a little bit.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to dial it back a little bit and talk about what a young Chris Rowley may have looked at. So tell me, did you grow up in Edinburgh?
Yeah, that's right. So born and bred in Edinburgh, and didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left school. Was one of those kids, I guess, that I got good exam results, good grades, and sort of was probably pushed slightly down the line of doing law. So I trained as a lawyer at university, and decided that wasn't really.
Was law something that your father had done, or why the
No, it wasn't actually. It was just I don't know. I think it was just sort of it maybe potentially sort of encouraged. As I say, I did okay at school, and that was sort of the route that I fell into. But I knew. I guess there's always been something in the back of my mind that this wasn't what I wanted to do. However, when I left university, I didn't at that point realise that it was food and it was a career sort of having my own food business. So I sort of fell into what we call sort of graduate training program, where graduates from university go on, and I joined one of the big UK banks and spent 10 years working for them.
So let me
brand and marketing.
Let me interrupt you there for a second, because I was curious what an even younger Chris Rowley looked like as a young lad.
Okay.
Were you the entrepreneurial type kid who had the lemonade stand, the paper route, cutting grass, or can you look back and see a budding entrepreneur when you look back at yourself as a child?
I think there's a lot of probably not. I don't know necessarily I had the sort of lemonade stand, but I think a lot of the characteristics I think you need to have in terms of sort of resilience and ability to sort of be quite creative, to problem solve, and just sort of juggle a lot of different balls in every day. I think when I look at the sort of characteristics that you need to be an entrepreneur, I think probably those were present from a very early age. And whatever I've sort of done, whether it's whatever sport it was I was doing at school or whether it's studying, I've always just wanted to do the best that I could, and that sort of every day. Some of the things that you were saying earlier on when we were chatting, was music to my ears when you were saying, the attention to detail and a well-managed business. That's what that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of those things on a smaller scale when you were younger, were definitely there. And I'd always sort of had sort of aspirations to do my own thing, but I don't think it's almost until now that I realised I had those, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so you do get through, and you graduate with a law degree. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So, law degree, but for whatever reason, I decided the world of the legal world wasn't exciting enough for me, so I went into the world of banking instead.
I see. And what years was that you were in banking?
So I graduated from university in 2003, and then worked for Lloyd's Banking Group until 2013.
So
probably some of the most challenging years to work in financial services.
Right. So That's kind of where I was going with that. I suspect that the years 2008 through 12 were a little challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was my career within Lloyd. I moved into business development and then marketing and brand, and I really enjoyed that. So I was sort of one step away, if you like, from the sort of financial side. But in all these tough times, marketing is an area that's looked at quite a lot, and I spent a lot of my time looking how to save money and cut costs rather than actually doing the bit that I enjoyed, which was the marketing. So I certainly became a bit disillusioned at times, I would say.
I would guess part of cutting costs is cutting the cost of labor and
yep.
And so, if I read some articles properly, it looked like you were involved in what we call in the United States layoffs, and I think you call redundancies there in Scotland.
Redundancy programs. Yeah.
And that's where people are being let go for cost saves. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we went through round after round of redundancy programs, and I think I don't know. One of the things I think having my own business now, I've had to make some very difficult decisions over the last few years at times, but they've been decisions that I've been in control of and able to influence. Where sometimes I think within a large organisation, especially that sort of middle management level, you're part of the machine and you're sort of following process. And it definitely, again, looking backwards, not necessarily knowing at the time, but that was the real frustration of mine, that I wasn't able to perhaps influence outcomes as much as I wanted to.
Right. So during this career in banking, and this is banking at the highest level. I mean, you're working for a very large bank and lots of employees, and a big corporate experience there. And it seems like at that time is when you and your wife had started Charlie and Evelyn's Table.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Tell us about that. What is Charlie and Evelyn's Table?
Yeah, so Charlie and Evelyn's Table was a pop-up restaurant, which were quite big at the time in London. We, at that point, were living in Edinburgh. And as far as we were aware, there wasn't one in Scotland. And I have to give credit to Rachel, my wife. It was her brainwave, and decided that something we both really enjoyed food and cooking, and spent a lot of our free time and evenings cooking for each other. And we just thought, actually, it could be a bit of fun to have a go at this, which I guess is maybe where that entrepreneurial sort of spirit kicks in. Although I have to say, it was not a money-making exercise to begin with by any stretch of the imagination. It was much more of a sort of hobby. But we used to we had a blog, and which obviously there was no cost involved in, and we used to advertise dates. And to our followers, and they used to book on and come along basically to our house for dinner, and I would cook for them, and Rachel would look after them front of house. It was just something that we really enjoyed doing, and it just we got fantastic feedback every time we put dates up. It just sold out, and it was a good, really good, great success.
So. That sounds really, really cool. I was just imagining there. You had done this many, many times, right? How many dinners would you guess that you had hosted?
Gosh, I don't think we've ever counted them, but I'm certain hundreds, good hundreds and hundreds of meals. So we tended to do on a Friday and Saturday night. So I'd be working all week in the bank, and then the weekends would be taken up by cooking and looking after guests in our home. But we genuinely we love what we do. To this day, we love what we do, so it doesn't always feel like work.
Yeah, that's what I was envisioning is after, certain of those events where you and your wife just being elated with how the evening went and how satisfied your customers were, and maybe exhausted after a week's work at the bank and a Friday or Saturday night, but of serving people. But I'm thinking there was a number of times there where you're laying in bed after an evening's dinner service, and you're saying, "Man, I love this." Is that something that you found happen?
There's a real there's a real passion, and I suppose that was the beginning of the start of the next chapter, and because we were, as you say, we were absolutely exhausted, but we still carried on doing it, and because we loved it, and that's where I realised that there was one bit of my week that I really enjoyed far more than the other bit, and both were work, and both were there's a potential to earn a living from, but I would really look forward to the cooking and the Friday, Saturday night hosting these dinners, and not so much to the sort of Monday to Friday slog of the corporate world.
Yeah. So at some point, you get to where you say it is time to make a career change. What did that look like? What point was that?
I would love to say that it was very planned out and organised. And despite me being quite a sort of planned and organised person, it's something we talked about. And I'd actually applied for voluntary redundancy numerous times in the bank because I had, when we've been doing this for a couple of years, this pop-up experience, I had an idea and I had something I wanted to do, and I thought that would give me the help on financially to do it, and it didn't happen. And at that point, as I say, we were living in Edinburgh, but my job was primarily based down in England. So I was travelling down to either London or Bristol, a good number of days a week, and there was a real sort of pressure growing for me to relocate down there, and I just suddenly, as I say, it wasn't particularly planned, it wasn't particularly organised. I just sort of came home one day and said to Rachel, my wife, I just don't want to do this anymore. It's not making me happy. And there's a lot of people probably in that situation, but actually there's something that I do want to do, and there's something that we want to do together. And I remember speaking to my mum and dad about it, who I think to begin with certainly thought that giving up a very safe and secure career in the bank wasn't maybe the best idea, but they certainly came around to it, and that was it really. It was just pretty much a sort of overnight decision. It's like, if I don't do it now, and if I don't make this decision, no one's ever going to make it for me. So I made it, and that's where the next chapter began.
Yeah, I read an interview with your wife, Rachel, and it was from the Egg, Edinburgh. And she said of you, I always argued that his self-motivation, ambition, and higher standards than I've ever known made him a wonderful entrepreneur, and imagined that although we'd both end up working harder than ever, we believed we'd be more satisfied. And she's talking about this next step, obviously, that you're getting ready to get into. Well, I guess there was an intermediate step, and that was you're diving into the proper training at Leith School of Food and Wine. Can you tell us?
That's right. Yeah.
Tell us about that experience and how.
Well, I actually took. There was an even a more sort of intermediate step. Actually, I just wasn't quite ready to commit to that training, sort of both financially and just unsure whether it was 110% committed. So I actually I left the bank on a Friday, had this sort of usual sort of leaving party you can imagine, and the next morning sort of woke up and thought, what have I done? What am I going to do? I sort of imagined myself having a couple of weeks where I'd just relax and finally, it would only been 10 years, but it'd be quite a nice thought to have a couple of weeks without any of that pressure. However, I sort of panicked, and as I say, I wasn't quite ready to commit to the full training, but got a job in an amazing restaurant in Edinburgh called Gardener's Cottage, run by two guys, what it was at the time, who it was an incredibly nurturing environment, and I went along to the interview. I still remember it was just advertised to sort of turn up at this time, and I looked at everyone else. You could tell they were very much trained chefs, and I had a chat with Dale, who employed me, who was very much sort of mentor for that time, and I just said, I have no experience. I love cooking, and I have a supper club, but I have no experience. And he took a gamble on me and took me on. So I worked there for best there about 10 months, and probably most of many ways inspiring and sort of formative 10 months of my career. It was just quite humbling to go back to the sort of the lowest rank in the kitchen, and the fact that Dale took a gamble on me. I just sort of felt I really had to prove myself. So it was long hours and hard work, but probably some of the most rewarding work I've ever done.
Well, I imagine when he talked to you, your employer talked to you at that point, what he saw was maybe a person who didn't have the professional training, but a guy that had a lot of passion. And I can tell you, as an employer and entrepreneur myself, I'll put passion over formal training every time. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually look for that now when I'm employing people. It's like you can teach them anything, but if the attitude is right, then that's the most important thing.
Exactly. That's one thing that you can't teach is passion, right? So if someone comes into your business, and they are passionate about succeeding and learning everything that it takes, well, you can train them on those parts. So yeah, that makes sense. So at some point after your time with that restaurant, you are ready to commit 110% to some formal training and certifications, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it was a bit of an upheaval because we moved to London at that stage. So two young kids, we moved down there, and Rachel was incredibly supportive of it. I guess we had a dream at the end of it that we were trying to achieve, and trained for a year at least School of Food and Wine in London, which I cannot speak highly enough about. I think it was just incredible grounding, incredible training. Again, hard work. Financially very difficult because I went from a decent financial source of income to being a student again. But I don't, no matter how challenging it was at times, I don't regret it for a second. And it was every penny of that was incredibly well spent because it was just, I'd say, incredibly strong grounding. And I still refer back to every day. I refer back to elements of that course in the work that I do now.
I was going to ask you how you did that financially, but you saved
how I did it financially.
Yeah, the school part. I mean, from what you just said, you have a wife, you have two kids. You came from a job with a good income to now you're a student, and but you're a student with a wife and two kids, and so.
So yeah, I mean, it was challenging, to be honest. We were fortunate that we were able to rent out our house back in Scotland, which covered the sort of the by renting somewhere far smaller in London, that we were able to sort of cover that cost. I took out a loan for my tuition fees, My dad helped me out a little bit, and I literally sort of worked at least 4 evenings a week when I was down there as well after studying, just to all the extras that any mum and dad will know that comes with having 2 young kids. Is a lot of outgoing. So just a mixture really. But again, just there was a goal at the end of it, so it was fine.
Well, I imagine your family, your wife in particular, must have been pretty proud. I saw where you had graduated after that year, at least, as student of the year or the best student, and saw an image of you with your name on a big plaque with one of the professors, it looked like. So it doesn't appear that you
it's a funny thing about that, actually. I probably wouldn't normally mention this, but she, just when you're talking about sort of being an entrepreneur and what drives you and whether any signs or whatever, I still remember the day we packed up from Scotland and drove down to London, and we were talking about my course and talking about things, and Rachel was having, I remember sitting in the passenger seat of the car looking at her phone and looking at the website, and she's saying, this award, this Student of the Year award, you should go for that. And I remember I said outwardly to her, I was like, you can't put that pressure on me. And inwardly I said, I'm going to get that.
Well, congratulations. That's a great story. MBD Automation is a proud sponsor for the Next Entrepreneur podcast, and we welcome them to the show. MBD Automation is a mechanical install contractor who installs conveyor systems and automated equipment, VRCs and singulators and sorters and all sorts of equipment that you'll find in e-commerce fulfillment centers, distribution centers, mail processing facilities, airports, and the industrial market, and in the defense industry. MBD Automation works all over the United States and has a list of international clients that they perform work for in the U.S. as well. When you're looking for your next mechanical install contractor, reach out to MBD Automation. They can be found on the internet at mbdautomation.com. You learned a lot there, and then you took your skill set and then began to find jobs in that food service industry after graduation, and you did that for how long?
So that was for probably about a year and a half. Almost 2 years actually. So I did I literally just immersed myself in whatever I could, and it wasn't ever, again, based on income. It was much more about experience. Some of the stuff I was doing, I wasn't even paid for. Some was, some wasn't. And it was much more about getting the right experience, because by that stage, we were further on in our thoughts and plans about starting our business. So, for example, I had never thought of having a cook school element as part of our business, but when I was at Leith, that really inspired me and I really enjoyed that side of it, the teaching side. So I got as much experience in different cook schools across London, so I could take the ideas back up with me to Scotland. There were certain chefs that I really admired. The amazing chef Nathan Outlaw, who has restaurants in London and Cornwall, and we went down to Cornwall for a few months, and I worked in his restaurant, also Rick Stein's restaurant. But it was very much, it probably appeared to the outside, so my friends and family, is quite random what I was doing, but it was planned in terms of I was trying to build specific experience, right, with a goal at the end.
And at this time, the advent of food cooking shows on TV and celebrity shows and the whole foodie culture is just exploding, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so
I guess everybody's talking about food, and everyone knows about food. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, at what point do you and your wife say, okay, now's the time. Now it's our turn to start our own business. Tell us what that looked like, and then tell us about finding your first property, Ballintaggart Farms.
Yeah, so we were living, at the time, down in London at this stage, and in a fairly small flat apartment, and we. I'm trying to think how I should answer this, but actually I should, just being completely honest, we weren't sure whether we'd do it the following year, 5 years after, 10 years after. My wife Rachel was pregnant with our third child, which we were absolutely delighted about. And we thought, right, we need to move. We cannot stay in this flat. We need to, as our family is growing, we need to move on. And we just thought, it's going to be difficult in London. Why are we staying here? We've got this dream, we've got this idea. Yes, another 5 years would be helpful, but actually, there's no reason why we can't just do it now. And this deadline, if you like, of our little son coming along, actually, really, we were suddenly like, actually, we can do this. We can. There's no reason what's stopping us. If he weren't coming along, we'd sort of carry on for another few years down there. But we're going to do it. So we, I was going to say, started the search for our ideal properties. And in all honesty, I'd probably been looking for the last 10 years, because I'd always thought about it in the background. We'd all talked about it, and we were looking for a rural property back in Scotland, which is where I'm from, and a property that would be somewhere we could live and work and have a lifestyle business, I guess, and it was a destination where guests would travel to, like yourself, but also it was accessible enough that we would get visitors who would come to just the cook school and just eat in our restaurant. So we looked at numerous different properties, most of which were in pretty bad state of repair. And then when Ballintaggart Farm, we viewed that, it just ticked for what we were looking for, every single box, and we just could imagine living and having the business we wanted to have there.
So at that point, you were able to sell your home in Scotland, in Edinburgh?
Absolutely, yeah. So
yeah.
we sold our property in Edinburgh and moved from London up to Scotland.
Yeah. So you went all in, right? You bought this property. It's not like you leased it, right?
No, yeah, all in.
You went all in, and it's a staggeringly beautiful property. It is just one of the most idyllic, scenic pieces of land that you could ever imagine. And the view across the Tay Valley is just stunning. And so I can absolutely see how you fell in love with it. And but also it was not a small step you took there. It was a pretty bold investment there. So I was just curious, with, your income producing years having been somewhat compromised with your training and the different experiences you had working and gaining the experience. Some of what you said you weren't able to get paid for it. To then come back and make a bold step like that. I was just curious, like, how big, how scary was that for you? I mean, and then how did you do it? Did you take on investors? Were you able to come up with it from the equity in your properties, or did it involve investment from family or friends, or how does an entrepreneur make a big, bold step like that?
Yeah, I guess that was something that I used to ask everybody that met who were starting a business, because that first hurdle of how do I actually do that and get it off the ground. So it was incredibly daunting, incredibly scary, and I think I now when we expand and grow to each stage of the business, it's less daunting because I think the first time is always the hardest. But we were fortunate that we, as I say, when I first joined the bank back in 2003, I was very sensible and purchased a property at the time, which I had equity within that property back in Edinburgh that I could release, fortunate to get a private investor as well, and then in terms of day to day how we made it work. That was for the property, and then to make it work day to day, I used my skills, if you like, that I'd learnt in London, and carried on doing things like private chefing and teaching cookery back in Scotland. So whilst we were setting up the business, I still had an income coming in, which was obviously incredibly helpful, having 3 small children, but also a real sort of security blanket, because actually, had it all gone wrong, I still was able to do something and make some money, which for me helped me sleep at night.
Right. So you're starting a new business, which you're about an hour and a half away from Edinburgh, which was home.
Yeah.
So what did that start? What did your business start look like? I mean, was it difficult for an extended period of time to get people to become aware of the Ballantaggart name? How did that look?
Yeah, I mean, I probably, if I'm being completely honest, didn't really enjoy the first 6 months of being having my own business, because there is always that question of, is this going to work, and where are the next people going to come from? And we were creating something from scratch. So what we bought is a beautiful property, but it was a residential property, and we've turned it into a business. So there wasn't any existing customer base. There was no passing trade, really. We're in a very rural area. So I really I had moments of self-doubt for definite, where I just, have we done completely the wrong thing here, and is this ever going to make any money? And we sort of like a bit. I guess what was reassuring though is we did what we did with our supper club, and we sort of learned from that insofar as start small and see how it goes. So yes, we had a huge outlay in terms of the property purchase, but we didn't take on huge staff by any stretch of the imagination. We didn't have a huge number of rooms, and we started small. So only 2 bedrooms within the farm building that we let out, as sort of bed and breakfast rooms, and then I would simply cook for people in the evening, and we very informally offered people cookery lessons if they were interested. I guess what then happened was we brought different things to the party, and my wife Rachel is her background is PR and marketing, and has done an amazing job on social media and with journalists, getting the right journalists along to review us. And there was one particular moment I remember about 6 months after we opened, where we were reviewed within the Sunday Times, the sort of biggest Sunday newspaper in the UK, and we were listed in the top 25 places to stay in the UK, which obviously was just unbelievable for us. So because we weren't that busy at the time, we had great feedback from anyone who was staying, but we really weren't very busy. And we got that review, and really since then, that was really the turning point for the business, and the phone didn't stop ringing the next day, and hasn't really ever since, which is amazing.
That is amazing. So I wanted to come back to that in a second about having a partnership with a wife and your brother Andrew as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The skill set between the three of us, it works really well.
Yeah, that's exceptional. So then your business begins to grow. And so where you start with the 2-room bed and breakfast, um, the cooking school, and then and then doing the dinners there at the farm. Um, you then began to grow, and just in the last year or so is when you bought the new 8-room hotel online. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So it was yeah about 2 years ago or so. My brother moved up and joined the business, and this was he actually came up to visit us, and sort of fell in love, I guess, with what we were doing. He'd always worked in hospitality. He's on the front of house service and drink side, completely different to what Rachel and I bring. And we spotted that the hotel was up for sale, and we just thought, let's go for this. And that sort of again, not particularly planned out way, and it was probably a little bit too soon, but it was too good an opportunity for it to pass us by.
And that's where we stayed, the Grandley Hotel, and it was.
That's correct. Yeah, so it's just about a mile from the farm, and it was actually, I suppose, originally in some ways we thought it would be a really, it was a sort of purpose-built, ready built hotel with 8 bedrooms, and it'd be a great way of expanding our room capacity when we were getting very busy. We ended up spending a lot of money on the renovation and it taking a lot longer to open, but it's still the fact we've got the 2 properties so close together with very much part of the same family but 2 distinct personalities seems to be working really well.
Yeah, it is really exceptional. So you saw an expansion of your business there, and with that hotel comes a restaurant and a pub. And so now you have a lot of different offerings, and your employee growth expands significantly as well, right? So, I mean, if you go back 2 years ago and look at the number of employees you had versus today, what do those numbers look like?
Yeah, so very crudely, when we first opened, it was just literally the 2 of us, myself and Rachel, and then that point I referred to where I was talking about the Sunday Times review, and the phone was ringing madly, coincided with when my brother moved up, because we were going to work on things together, which was very fortunate, and his lovely girlfriend as well, who's part of our business, and again, she was only going to help us out a couple of days a week, but within about 2 days realized it was virtually a full-time job. So we were sort of sitting at 4, then a few part-time staff a couple of years ago, and then we're now sitting at 56 employees across the sort of the 3 different businesses, including the sort of catering and event side as well. So incredibly rapid growth, quite terrifying to be honest. But
I was thinking about that. Those were the numbers that I heard while I was there. Maybe when I was talking with Andrew, and I was just struck by how significant that is to any entrepreneur to make that initial leap, and also aware, having been in that situation myself, the stress that goes with that. But it struck me that if you went back a few years at your banking job, you were in a situation in which you were laying people off, right? And as the term we use in the United States, and redundancies for you guys. And here you are now hiring people and growing a business. And as stressful as that must have been, there must have been a tremendous amount of gratification in looking at the difference between, the Chris Rowley and either one of those situations.
Absolutely. I mean, it's nothing. I love working with people and getting the best out of people and working as a team. So it's great when the business can support growth and we can bring people in and bring good people in, and that's a far nicer thing to do than being making people redundant and affecting their life in a negative way. So
Right.
it's a much. Still get me wrong, there's still difficult decisions to be made and
Sure.
costs to be looked at, and when it's your own business, you feel it a lot more than you do when you're part of a corporate organisation. But it's much more pleasant doing what I'm doing now than looking back 10 years ago.
The other thing that I picked up on is that as you were able to bring new staff on, maybe a new chef, that that chef may have some specialty, maybe in baking bread or in pastries or
Yep.
And then the rest of the staff can kind of get excited about this new expertise from one of the staff members. I could just kind of sense that as each of our courses would come out for that 6-course meal, there seemed to be a story. It was very well presented. The chef would come out, as you well know, and to each of us and make the presentation for each of the courses. And I could just sense a lot of gratification in the chef's experience there and satisfaction for. It was really cool.
That's lovely to hear. And that idea sort of coming out and announcing was something I used to do back when we had our supper club, our pop-up restaurants, and I always used to come out and it's very personal. And I just thought, actually, I want to recreate that here at the farm. And not every chef that comes for an interview is particularly comfortable with that, so they may not be right for here. But also that sort of, as you say, that real sense of involvement from the chefs, that they really care about what they do. I often say to people, you could probably earn the same salary in another restaurant and you wouldn't have to care so much, but if you care about your food and you want to know where it comes from and you care about your wine list and you care about the guest experience, then come and work for us, because that's what we're all about. And the fact that that's coming across is, as I say, it's lovely to hear.
Oh, it was definitely palpable, and it added to the experience. There's no question about that.
Good.
So,
Good.
Tell me what's next for Ballantaggart.
Sorry, say again.
What do you see as being the next step for Ballantaggart? I mean, even if you're in a period of stabilization for what you have going on, when you look beyond that, what do you see next for?
No, I mean it's it's a $1 million question. So very short term, we really want to do some work within the farm. We've sort of, as I say, we bought it as a sort of lifestyle business for the two of us, and it's very quickly outgrown that. So we want to do some work in terms of just making it a little bit more suited to the business that we now have. So some smaller stuff. We want to increase our kitchen garden capacity and put in a greenhouse. So lots of little projects around the farm. There's always something that we're looking to do. And then after that, what next? Obviously we don't want to lose focus. It's still very early days for us, so we are consolidating. But I'd be lying if I wasn't sort of thinking, right, what after that? And I guess we'd love to take the Ballantaggart concept into a city at some point, and that might be years and years away. But as I say, it is very, very early days for our business, and we've grown very, very fast, and I'm very conscious of that and the pressure that puts on you as me as a person and my family and Rachel and Andrew, and So I'm in no rush to do that. But we've always sort of, my brother and I have also talked about having a sort of city centre brasserie, and we've got some ideas around how we might transfer what we're doing at the farm into the city. So that's an exciting project. And then I'm always looking at different things as well. So I've got a recipe book in my head that I'm desperately trying to find the time to put down onto paper. So there's that project, and a few other bits and pieces along the way. So it's lots of ideas.
I mean, I always think that's the exciting part of entrepreneurism, is that that slate is always there to keep creating, and to find the synergies between your existing operations and how you leverage that. And it just looks like you're doing that really well. So we didn't really talk much about your the catering aspect of your business, but I did just want to mention that it looks to me like there's a whole lot of creative experiences that you guys are doing now, and the potential for that to grow seems really unlimited.
Yeah, and it's a great bit of business from a purely business point of view. I'm glad you sort of came back to it, because it's actually allowed us to grow at certain points, because you can sort of the overheads are relatively small. The way we staff it from our existing business, which we genuinely is a selling point, and I mean a genuine selling point. So it's restaurant chefs that are coming into your venue or your house or your wedding, and it's restaurant staff that are doing it, and you get the real Ballantag experience. So it's a real selling point, but it also works for us. It's allowed us to possibly overstaff some of our other businesses at times, because we know we've got this backup of the event side.
Right.
And it's not to say that one is more important than the other. The three of them sort of complement each other really well. But we've been able to be quite clever with the staffing. And it's lovely, because we've also had months where we maybe a little bit quieter in the winter here, and we've been able to sort of push out our, as I say, these pop-up experiences where we go and pop up in other venues and create events, which is something that is incredibly useful. So instead of waiting for customers to come to us, we actually go and find them. And then we can also go out and seek other venues to work in collaboration with. So it's a really it's an enjoyable bit of business. It's a fun bit of business, but it's also it works very well for us, because we can sort of play it to our advantage in terms of helping us manage and grow the other bits.
Excellent. Look, a couple of wrap-up questions here. First is, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old Chris Rowley?
Two things. I think, firstly, really challenge yourself, challenge what you, because I think deep down somewhere, I knew I wanted to do this. However, having said that, I think, had I done it when I was 20, I probably wouldn't have the business I have at the moment. So, getting that experience was worthwhile. And I think the other thing is just sort of having faith in your decisions, and having faith in belief in what you want to do. I think I still do sort of constantly seek sort of reassurance, which maybe isn't a bad thing, but just have sort of courage in your convictions and go for it. I see a lot of people, chat to a lot of people that are great chefs and have a good idea of something they want to do, and I just kind of say, go for it. It's not as difficult as you think it might be, and I'm glad I changed career, and I'm glad I started my own business when I was in my 30s. But had I not, I think you've got to have that sort of courage and that belief, which isn't always there when you're 20.
Right. So, and this is somewhat similar, but there are going to be some listeners out there who, like you, may have been stuck in a job, or maybe stuck in a job that is not overly gratifying or satisfying, but it's, it's stable. It helps pay the bills. But there's something out there that, that they may be passionate about, but they're reluctant to take that step to start up something. And what would you tell that person if they ask your advice? Chris Rowley, you did it. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, no, it's to me, it's looking back. I think it felt like the hugest thing to do, and I think any big decision at the time when you're in that moment almost seems like it's insurmountable and you can't do it. It was possibly that it was, it was a few words. I just had to say to my boss, this is it. I don't want to do it anymore, and the rest just somehow happens. When you can plan it as much as you want, and I think I look back at my original business plan, and I think it was way off the mark, but it was something, and it was a start, and it got us where we wanted to get to. But I guess if you believe in it, just go for it, because the rest will happen. As long as you're sensible, you've got the right work ethic, and you've got an idea, then just go for it. And I think you're the only person that can make that happen. I think for years I sat within an organisation, trying to get voluntary redundancy, waiting for a sort of life-changing moment that was going to encourage me to do something. And actually, the realization came when it was only me that could make that decision, and it's only a few words, and it's not that difficult. And it's the best thing I've ever done.
Well, Chris, you have a great story, and I've thoroughly enjoyed digging into it with you. I experienced it firsthand. I could feel the passion that your family is putting out there in your products, and I thank you so much for your time, and I wish you great success in everything that you do moving forward. So how can our listeners find you on social media?
So the Instagram is we use the most, and we are just at Ballantaggart, which is BALLINTAGGART, at Ballantaggart, and our website is ballantaggart.com. So if you want to have a look at what we're up to, that's where to find us.
Chris, thank you for your time, and the best of luck to you and your wife and Andrew for the continued growth of your business. And we greatly appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
So that was Chris Rowley with Ballantaggart, and it was such a pleasure to talk with him. Certainly a treat to visit Chris in Scotland and see his businesses. The interview obviously was conducted by the phone. It's our second interview that we've conducted for the Next Entrepreneur podcast, and our second international guest. So we're very pleased about that. We will continue to try to bring interesting stories of entrepreneurs from all over the world whenever possible. I tell you, the thing that struck me most about Chris's story is how he did a complete reset on his career. So he had a well-established career in the banking industry, had a wife and 2 kids, and was fairly entrenched in his life, but he knew there was something else, and he pushed reset, and he started over. And there's a lot to be learned from that as an option for any entrepreneur and how they may start. You may feel like you are set in your routine with your career and your family, and maybe it's too late. But I think Chris showed us that that's not necessarily the case. So a really good example of how you can start your entrepreneurial journey. Chris can be found at his website, ballantaggart.com, BALLINTAGGART.com. You can listen to The Next Entrepreneur on Spotify. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. Our producers are Daniel Sagona and Benjamin Connell.